lift up the CRA audit and their recommendation, Lord God, and the workings going under 19 and the discussions. And so, Lord, tonight we just commit it to you. We acknowledge you and ask you, Father, in the name of Jesus, by your mercy and grace, to guide us and the wisdom of the decisions tonight. We ask it in Jesus' name.
Mayor Scott Tremblay.
Here.
Vice Mayor Tom Kinsella.
Here.
Councilman Todd McClary.
Here.
Councilwoman Linda Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilman Bill Colombo.
Here.
City Attorney James Matthew.
Here.
City Manager John Duke.
Here. Looking for a motion to approve council minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor? Aye. We're going to move on to commentary from the general public. I'd like to invite Pastor Lord first. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Leonard Lord, I pastored 8114 Lee Oakhead Avenue. I want to thank Danny Fields last time, and he did give a report, I'm sure, on the Easter egg hunt in the park. And they were right close to 170 children. And so, again, we want to thank the police department, fire department. What a great job. I told the chief to see those 4 new cars sitting up there with all the lights flashing with the kids around them and the fire trucks. It was just great. It's just great working with you. This last year, having the events in the park, I don't know that it brought any growth to the church, but I know it's healthier for the city, and we enjoy doing it. Also, our next one will be July 30th, which is our backpack giveaway. Usually we get those stuff for under $10. And so if you know of anybody that wants to help us, we do have some from last year. And so we'll be announcing more on that. And hopefully with that, we can, our families in the city, it'll help them out. Hopefully get the backpacks, get them ready and set up for school. So thank y'all for all you do. And, give us a call if there's any way we can help and serve the city. Okay? Thank y'all, and Lord bless you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dave Mueller, 5439 Blue Point Drive. Couple ideas. I notice you guys have these big screens on the back that constantly recycles the same stuff. I'm wondering if somebody could make an effort to try to put the agenda on there as you guys are going through it. It'd be a good way to follow along, potentially. Also, I know that there's Wi-Fi in this building, public building. Is there a way that that can be made to a guest so that people can come in and have Wi-Fi access when they're here in this meeting to help with notes and things like that? In addition, I know the Florida governor appropriated funds for manatee habitat. I passed some information along to Pam with the potential to maybe look and grab some of that if there's any funding available for that. It would be a big win for our waterfront area, and potentially we could utilize that to help improve the water quality here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. That's all that's signed up, but I see a few other people here. By show of hands, would anyone else like to speak? Seeing no hands, we're going to move on to our comments from our city manager. Welcome, Mr. Duke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The core sample report on the pylons for the fishing pier has been received and has been submitted back to our engineering firm. They're in the process of writing a recommendation. They'll give us their recommendation as to whether the pylons are sufficient to hold up a pier or not. Once we have that, then we can make some decisions about what we're going to do with that report and with the pylons. Had the pleasure to attend the Municipal Association of Pasco meeting, MAP. I want to thank Mr. Colombo for joining me. Probably the most prominent and germane topic that evening was Penny for Pasco and what all of us as municipalities can do to help support the county and trying to get that renewed. So you're going to see more activity amongst the municipalities in that effort, be collaborating with the county, an important topic for all of us. And it's apparent that all the municipalities in Pasco County are pretty focused on that. Unfortunately, you put all the people in the cities together, we're only about 7% of the population of Pasco County. So we'll do all we can. But there's a lot of folks that live outside of municipalities that Pasco County is going to have to reach as well. Really excited to announce we were advised late last week that the city has been awarded a $75,000 grant from the Department of Environmental Protection. I want to thank Pam for all of her hard work on that. The grant is focused on flood hazard mitigation plan, which is a component of our comprehensive plan. And the grant funds are sufficient and allow for a complete update of the comprehensive plan. And so we'll be getting started on RFQs and working towards that update to the comprehensive plan. But just got notified of that late last week, and I'm very excited about that. Finally, I wanted to introduce Robin Martinjack. Robin is our been with us 4, 5, 6 weeks now. Code compliance officer. She's been very busy out on the streets doing code compliance and, if and when necessary, code enforcement. You can see in your monthly report, she's been busy and will continue to be so. So I wanted you all to know who she is, and if you see her on the streets, she's doing code compliance. So thank you for being here, Robin. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. I stand for your questions.
Thank you. I'll start to my right with Vice Mayor Kinsella.
Question I have as we're getting ready to enter the hurricane season, is the city going to be proactive, especially with our drainage? Are they going to start that fairly soon?
Yes, there's a number of activities that are already underway. On the administrative side, staff is already working on the newsletter that goes out. That's a component of our CRS compliance. It's good practice. We also get points for doing that, but it makes people aware of hurricane season is coming. Public Works is continually maintaining the drainage system. That's part of their weekly, monthly maintenance program. So they're out there taking care of that. And we'll update you on police and fire and activities that they're going to be engaged in. But we are aware of it, starting to do the things that we do on a regular basis.
Perfect. And one other, I attended the CAC meeting last week, and a number of the committee members made a comment about they feel that the webpage for City of Port Richey is not up to date. They all made comments that there's some things that are still on there that don't need to be on there, and they're also asking for that report for not only the fire department, the police department, the activity, monthly activity. We had talked about this once before, where just the number of, with the police department, we get that printout where number of burglaries, shoplifting, and so forth, and something like that posted on the webpage to show our activity, what's going on, and make the citizens aware.
Do you think the reports that you get on a monthly basis would be sufficient, or some other form? We can take the monthly report and post those more prominently. But
the one I've seen for the police department, just the one in particular, I feel to be fairly. This one page here, April 2022, has the types of calls and the number.
Okay.
So this piece right here, the fire department, I think it's a little too much, but something broken down similar to what the police department has, the number of calls, what type of calls, okay, so forth. And again, it's just keeping our citizens informed what that they are really out there working.
I'll work with the chiefs and see if we can get something
Thank you. That's all
posted more prominently.
I just had one kind of question. And it has to do with the grant. I know that we have a person in the city. We're fortunate to have someone to work on grants. That type of grant, depending on where it's from, may take a lot of resources to administer. Can you kind of tell us what we should expect in terms of the administration of that grant and whether or not it's worth it? Sometimes the value you get out of a grant isn't worth the amount of money you put into administer it. So I just want to make sure we're making smart decisions on the grants that we do accept. Right. And that was one of the things if you don't have that information now, maybe at the next meeting, you can kind of say this is the resources we're going to have to expend to administer the grant versus this is what we're going to get out of it. So we can make sure that we're accepting the right types of grants.
Okay, I'll put that together for you for this grant. Get a timeline and bring that back.
And don't get me wrong, I love the idea of grants. I just want to make sure that it's going to be cost effective for us.
Right.
Thank you for doing that for me. That's the only comment that I had in terms of your notes. Mr. Colombo?
Am I next?
Yes, sir.
I'll push the button. A couple of things that our city manager brought up. I'm very happy to see progress being made on the old bridge fishing pier on the south side. I know a lot of us really would like to see that happen, and I sure hope we can do that in a relatively quick and have it done right. So that is a very good thing. I will play off of what you mentioned about the MAP meeting. Again, they did focus very much on penny for Pasco. Those of us on council are very much aware of just how important penny for Pasco is to our city. If we were to lose penny for Pasco, all that equipment, capital equipment, police cars, Vector trucks, fire trucks and such, that would be coming out of the general fund, and that would mean higher taxes. So again, as Mr. Duke mentioned, we are a pretty small voice in a very large county, but talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. It's vitally important to us that penny for Pasco sticks around. Welcome, Robin. I saw you twice. You drove up my street. You drove down my street. I waved. You were looking the other way. Keep up the good work. But I did see you out there and doing your job already. So I do recognize you. I did see you, and welcome to our city. And I look forward to your addressing issues that the city is anxious that addressed, and understand you're not going to be the most popular person in town. That being said, I have no other issues to address, and we can move on.
I'm good right now, thank you.
Okay.
Good.
We're going to go to comments from our council now. And do you have any other commentary? Any commentary? I have none other than what I've already said. Vice Mayor?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. At this time, comments from boards and committees, and I wanted to kind of save my comment for there. I saw an email come through that it looked like someone may be resigning from the CHC.
I was asking if I could slide over and let a new council person step in as the liaison.
Okay. Can we address that during boards and committees, or should we put that? Well, I guess the question is, anyone interested in serving in the CSC again?
Yeah.
So do we need to vote on that, or what's the best way to handle that?
Yeah, we need to vote on that. Yes.
So we should maybe put it on the next agenda and address it.
I don't see any reason we just can't vote on it right now.
Okay. All right, looking for a motion.
Motion to reinstate Linda Rodriguez to the Citizen Advisory Committee.
Second.
Before we vote, anyone in the general public would wish to make any kind of comment? I know it wasn't advertised. So seeing no commentary, let's put it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
I believe we still do have vacancies on that board. Not seeing
Are we full?
No.
Yes.
We full?
CSC is full.
Wow,
Yeah.
how about that? It's not a small group.
There's 9.
Do people have to sit down all or?
Actually, this is all,
It's all
they
members,
sit
yeah.
right here.
Okay, great.
So I appreciate you letting me address that during the boards and committees. At this time, we'll move on to the consent agenda, looking for a motion.
A motion approved consent agenda.
Second.
Any need for any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We have several items up on our regular agenda items. The first is going to be the Cip Utilities Discussion. This looks like it's a discussion and not an action item, so I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Duke for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The discussion starts with the plan that staff has put together on page 13 in your agenda. You see for 2023, the plan is to, pending your approval, obviously, make the next payment on the Vector truck. We've got information in your packet about our current backhoe and the need for a new backhoe. And the third item on the list is replacing the pickup truck that Public Works and Utilities currently has. So there is pictures and explanation in your packet. Those are the 3 items on the FY23 proposed purchase list.
And one of them is already just amortized, so we're paying one way or the other. That's the factor.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So what we're talking about are the other 2 items.
Correct.
Okay. And then the only other thing I wanted to ask is, do we have an update before we open discussion? Do we have any information on Penny for Pasco and how we're looking in that fund balance? Number 1, and number 2, how our fund balances look in our utility fund, because this can be funded out of our utilities. It is an enterprise fund, correct?
Correct.
So is that a potential that we may want to fund these out of that instead and then put that as part of our CIP plan?
I'd look to finance, tells whether we have the money in there. On page 14, there's
Okay.
your Penny for Pasco roll forward fund balance, anticipated revenue, and estimated fund balance.
Okay.
So those numbers are there for you on page 14. It would be justifiable to spend some money out of utility funds for both of those vehicles. They obviously are both used for utilities. They're also used for parks and recreation kinds of things as well. So it might be a distribution, but look to Rachel if she has anything to add there.
Okay. Do we know what the distribution is between the 2? So if we're going to fund appropriately out of each?
Well, I noticed on page 13, if you look at some of those items, if you look at the far right, you can see 50/50 Penny for Pasco on several of those items.
Oh, I do see that. Okay, I apologize. I didn't see that. All right. Okay.
But, okay, it's not my turn.
No. Who would like to start the discussion? I was gonna, now that it's been introduced, open it. And I'll start with, actually, well, you were commenting already, so I'll start with you, Mr. Colombo.
Okay, yeah. At the immediate subject at hand, which is the, essentially our opinion on this front loader backhoe. Yeah, the 428. I fully accept that's a reasonable thing for us to be looking at right now, given its age, given the hours it's on it, and given how much we use that type of capital equipment. I'm generally a fan of packing as much in Penny for Pasco as you can, and whenever it comes to any of these large capital purchases. So that's, I guess the big item at hand. The other, going back to page 13 again, where we basically kind of look into the future, that when was it we last replaced the brush truck? It hasn't been all that long, has it?
We actually have a fairly newer brush truck right now,
So this, I know we have a newer one. Is this like we have two and this is the other one?
Yeah, the only truck I have on here is a pickup truck. If you're talking about the brush truck that actually collects the
Yeah, I'm
brush.
looking on page 13 here. I'm seeing.
Oh, you're looking at the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I'm looking at the spreadsheet. We're talking about 2026, I understand. But
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the one that we're replacing is the 2015, so we have a newer one now, but it'll be the 2015 that will be
in
replaced.
2015, it will not be the newer one.
No.
Well, it will be the newer one, it just won't be new.
Right.
How comfortable are we at the price of $55,000 for a brush truck? That seems pretty conservative.
Yeah, that's probably gonna be evaluated, way value, inflation is been, we're
I'm
probably,
just, do you recall what we paid for the last one? Do you?
I don't have that number on me now,
You're
but,
usually,
yeah.
you've got those things.
I'll shoot you over the numbers.
Again, obviously, this is not a pressing issue right now because we are talking about something that's slated for fiscal year 26. But still, I'm looking at an F-550 brush truck budgeted at, 55K split 50-50 between Penny for Pasco and.
And what I can do for now, what we can do for either slated for next meeting, we can probably pull some numbers from the state contract, which is probably where we're gonna be pricing the vehicle out anyway.
And again,
Yeah, and just see what we're looking at now, but of course, by
we
26, we're gonna be talking about
we have
different
no
numbers
idea.
anyway.
And again, every time you're looking at what you might spend 4 years from now, especially in today's world, is a best guess at best,
Yeah,
or WAG as they call them,
estimating, you're gonna have to look at either anywhere between 10, 15, 20% maybe.
Right. Easily.
We have vehicles right now that we ordered last year that we're still waiting on.
Yeah,
That's
and
another issue.
our biggest issue right now with any vehicle is more in the immediate future than the distant future, just because of the supply line issues on parts, electronics, materials for cars. That's gonna work itself out sooner or later. But that doesn't mean prices are gonna go down, it just doesn't mean they're gonna accelerate as quickly as they're accelerating right now. But, yeah, as far as what I'm seeing in front of me, I don't have any issues with what I'm looking at. And I certainly see the major piece of capital equipment that we're looking at is something that, considering I have just some ballpark, Sal, I'll go to you just because, you have a lot of experience with that portion of the city business. Just how frequently do we use that?
Which,
The current,
the backhoe?
the one we're looking to replace.
The backhoe?
Yeah.
All the time, every day. Both sides, both public works and utilities utilize that vehicle for a multitude of items. Anywhere from responding to main breaks to loading material on both sides. We've used it we use it at the brush pile to push up brush when we're collecting more. Like I said, we use it for loading material to respond to main breaks. We use it for at the waterfront park, we bring in more crushed shell or mulch for the playgrounds. That machine will be used for, like I said, a multitude of.
And that's the point I'm driving at is for, those folks that might be listening in understand this is not a piece of heavy equipment that sits in a lot and we use it every now and then. That thing is out on the street doing something virtually every day.
I would say almost every day.
Yeah, you don't know how many times the hour meter on that's rolled over so far, but yeah. So that's all I have.
There's going to be one other issue that I'll bring up, and rather than go back around, I'll just raise it right up front. What's your feeling on the amortizing this over several years versus just paying for it out of Penny for Pasco just up front? I didn't know if you had an opinion on that. I was going to raise that issue eventually when I come back. If you have an opinion one way or the other on that.
The backhoe?
Yeah.
That is accurate.
Right, versus just paying for it. 'Cause there's plenty of money just to pay for it outright too, just looking at the fund balance.
Well, that's more of a financial consideration than anything, isn't it? I don't know what the fund balance is. That's I haven't dug that deep into it.
Okay.
We're looking at fiscal year 23, so that would pretty much be up to the city manager, in a budgeting process to tell us how much we're projected to get from Penny for Pasco, how much leeway we do have. No, to get to your point though, I am fond of buying outright if we can.
Okay.
We've done that before. Sometimes leasing is very advantageous. Other times, buying outright is the best way to go. I'm one of them buy it, know it kind of people, but, again, that's more of a financial consideration, budget consideration than anything else.
Okay.
John, do you have anything on that?
Well, on page 14, you've got your FY23 expectations. We'll have an expected balance to begin the year, $523,995. We're anticipating $450,000 in revenue and an estimated fund balance of $973. So, if you wanted us to write a check for it, we've got the cash to do it. And you give up the opportunity to spread out the payments and buy other things that might come up. But,
And let me bring up one other thing that just popped into my head right now, is essentially Penny for Pasco needs to be renewed 2 years from now. I mean, it's on the election this year, but it also, if it doesn't pass this year, they can put it back on next year and hopefully get it through. If we budget things planning on Penny for Pasco even being there beyond 2025 and it's not there, where does that leave us?
well, you can see in that chart, we laid out the plan as if it does not pass. And by fiscal year 26, there's down to 245,000 for a rollover balance, and with the expected expenditures by 27, we're almost 100,000 in the hole. So we took the most conservative, pessimistic view. Obviously, if it gets renewed, that's great. If it doesn't, this is where we are.
Gotcha. I wasn't looking at that bottom line. Always look at the bottom line.
Page 14 at the top.
I see that.
Thank you. I was going to pass the baton to Ms. Rodriguez and get your opinion on these items and what you think.
I do know the backhoe gets used a lot. Would this be a second backhoe, or are we retiring the first one?
We're probably going to we'll use the older one for as long as we can, but it'll eventually be retired. Probably just keep it to more conservative type of workload. As backup, or if there's just to load material into a dump truck or something like that it can manage. But with the thousands of dollars that we're just putting into that, it's quite a bit. And to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, as we get closer, we want to explore both options as far as either leasing or buying outright. But our main concern is making sure we get like a warranty coverage for it. Because in the past, when they've leased a backhoe before, it would come with like a full coverage plan during that entire lease package. So we're kind of looking into that. But one way or the other, we would like to have that at least covered for the first 5 years or so. So, in case this machine has, some issue, the company will take care of it, especially for how long they get used. So we will want to explore both options of buying outright or leasing.
But even if you buy outright, you can still have the package for the maintenance.
And that's what we want to look into too, if they're going to provide a warranty package or something that's going to be just as good as the leasing coverage. So we want to look into both.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think we need the backhoe. I mean, with all the water main breaks, and I see that backhoe's really used a lot. Yeah, absolutely. We need to have that.
And then I'm going to come over to our vice mayor and then work back around.
Questions I've had were already answered, thank you.
Okay. And Mr. McCleary?
Question I had, along the same lines of the F-550, but going back to 2023, we have 46,000 budgeted for an F-250. 250
No,
with
50.
ladder. Huh?
250.
250. With ladder rack and all that, is that an accurate amount given?
That's probably more on the conservative side. Like I said, with the way prices are escalating.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being a $60,000 vehicle easily.
It's going to probably have to be reevaluated soon because, especially the price of pickups, no matter what brand they are escalating constantly. So, at the time of what we have this, but I'm going to provide, like I said, I can provide current state contract pricing, but each year that's going to change constantly. So we're probably going to have to address that as we move forward.
Okay. In terms of the backhoe, yeah, we need it. We use it every day. In terms of the amortization, you're going into a rising interest rate environment. So to me, the next 2 to 3 years will probably be higher rates than they are today. So we might as well take advantage of it, because anything, if Penny for Pasco goes away, you don't want to be leasing 2 years from now. You'd rather be leasing at today's rates and then paying cash 2 years from now, from my perspective. So I'd rather lock in a rate. It'll probably go up and then go back down again. So I'd rather lock in a rate for 5 years if we can, at a reasonable rate, i.e. 4 to 5%, whatever they're seeing now, instead of the 6 to 7% that you'll probably see in two years or so. So that's my perspective in terms of cash.
Well, we're pretty much looking at rates that are not today's rates, but several months.
Well, yeah, it's not the purchase you're making in fiscal year 23. It's the purchase that you may have to finance in 2025 if you use all your
It's gonna
cash.
be all better. Come on.
Just push it.
Interest rates are gonna drop like a rock.
Sure. Tell me. So that's my thought process. So we may want to reevaluate some of these prices in the 2023 capital plan, because I'm doing budgets now and I'm seeing 15-20% increases year over year on certain items. So we may definitely want to take a look at this, because you may be conservative in several areas. That's all.
Thank you. I wanted just to touch on a couple things. The need for these items certainly are there. There's no doubt that we need to purchase these items. My only concern is how we go about doing it and from which fund balance. And the bigger item was one I was kind of looking for in terms of whether or not some of that should come out of the utilities. It's a large purchase. Based on the amount of the purchase, my thoughts would be, if you have enough, which we have plenty in this Penny for Pasco by itself, but we may want to take a little cash out of the utilities, which is supposed to be an enterprise fund anyway, to make money. And certainly this is one of the items that we need to make money out of that fund, and just pay for the item. I'd prefer not to borrow money if we don't have to, if we have the money sitting there. So that would be my preference. But what I would ask is, when we come to the budget, whether or not we can kind of get a look at what it looks like if we pay for it up front versus if we amortize it over time. And then the only other issue is to make sure that we address the fund balance and whether or not we want to pay for some of that out of utilities, which is the enterprise fund, versus 100% out of Penny for Pasco. And I didn't know if you guys had a preference, but I'd like to look at those numbers, maybe when the budget comes out, the first budget workshop.
Well, again, some of this equipment, a lot of this equipment, we've traditionally budgeted 50-50, because it is kind of hard to figure out just what percentage utilities use and what percentage public works is using. On the flip side, as you did mention, our utilities is in fact a enterprise fund, and the cost for utilities rightly should be allocated to utilities. In other words, my preference as to what budget I might like to see what percentage come out of is really not as germane as exactly what is allocated properly to the utilities fund, because the utilities fund should be a self-sustaining entity, along with basically getting a capital fund ahead of the game, because not obviously everything is not an annual purchase. So, just like this isn't, there's that time when you got to replace all the media, the sand filters or whatever, or some big water plant or water tank goes down, water tank goes down, exactly. So, again, the utility fund, the utility fund being an enterprise fund should be self-sustaining. So your question about what percentage goes to utilities is a pretty good question, and I don't know where we go beyond just saying 50-50. I'll throw that back over to the city manager, because operationally and budgetarily, that's kind of fine.
And my point is, it shouldn't be 100%, 0% one way or the other. And
Right.
however they allocate it, I'm fine as long as it's like a 50-50 type number.
Right.
But that was the only concern that I had, is I felt that it should be really coming out of both fund balances, not just penny for Pasco.
I would not disagree with that. It's double negative.
And that's all I have on that issue. If anyone else would like to go back around, we spoke.
I'm fine.
Good. Vice Mayor?
I think we have a consent.
Perfect. I believe that closes out, that was just a discussion item. Now we're gonna go to the purchase request of JLG T350 Pro Boom Lift, and that's gonna go to Mr. Dude for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a replacement of a piece of equipment that we did have. That piece of equipment was damaged beyond repair, beyond use. We submitted a claim for insurance. The insurance was approved and came within, I think, just a couple $100 or even less, covering the cost of replacing the boom. So would request a motion to approve the purchase to replace the damaged lift.
I'll open it for discussion.
So essentially, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't officially get the form. So.
Go ahead.
So essentially what we're voting on is up to $142 expenditure.
Correct. We have received
And you
the
managed
insurance.
70 pages in the agenda.
Yes,
Nicely done.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, what happened to the man lift that we managed to get insurance for?
It was involved in a motor vehicle crash, dumped off the trailer, destroyed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for insurance.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. I'll make a motion if nobody has anything to say.
One last question. The cost of does this include some type of a maintenance agreement? Is it necessary to have a maintenance agreement?
I believe so. Let me refer to Mr. LaFarge just to confirm.
The quote that we approached with Kelly Tractor, I don't believe included a maintenance contract. We tried to get the closest price to what we were reimbursed on. This was the closest quote. Usually with a piece of equipment like this, maintenance is very minimal. There's some grease fittings or whatnot to do, and batteries to charge. But the lift before that we're replacing required very little maintenance. It just basically it's and as far as the one that was damaged, it's it's a man lift. Any amount of damage that they have to put, when you're lifting a man in the air under OSHA standards, they the insurance company definitely just wanted to replace as opposed to fixing the old one, because then you're at liability in case something happens.
Like off the state list?
But I can approach Kelly Tractor to see if they provide if they do provide like maintenance agreement or a warranty or something like that, and I can approach that price to council if need be. It probably be very minimal.
There's not much of a maintenance on this piece of equipment. May not be worth it.
Yeah, our old one didn't require much. It just, like I said, it was very little. The old one was battery powered. You charged the batteries, you operated the motor, made sure it functioned. There's a couple of the grease fittings as the lift extends itself, but it is very minimal. Not like a vehicle or a thing with a lot more components or parts to it. But like I said, I'll approach Kelly Tractor and present that to the city manager if they have a type of warranty or extended policy, and then find out if that's feasible enough. If they're going to tell us it's $10,000 or something like that, it's not going to be worth it. But if it's very minimal, then we can.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
And so far, we have a motion, and then we open for discussion.
Yeah, which we should not have done, actually. If we didn't get a second, my motion basically died for lack of a second.
What I wanted to do is continue the discussion, and then we'll.
Yeah, I'm
swing the
okay
motion.
with that, that's
Okay.
fine, yeah.
Because I had a question too, and I was waiting to see if anyone else was gonna ask the type of question I was asking, but I see that it looks like, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where you have the vendor name on page 37 and you have the 3 vendors and the cost. Are those costs off a list or is this some kind of a bid? In other words, is this off the state contract, FSA 20 EQU 8.0?
Yes, it's part of the Florida Sheriff's Association contract, which is attached to the agenda.
So we don't need any bids or 3 bids at all. We can just pick any one of these
Right,
because it's
because it's part of that state contract, yes.
understood.
We've used it before for, purchase police vehicles and whatnot. We utilize the same contract.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were using our mechanism to purchase, which would not necessarily be off a bid, but would be off the state contract.
Yeah.
Okay,
And these 3 vendors are off that contract.
so all 3, that's what all 3 of these are?
Yes, the numbers to each one of these, that's there. You can find each one of these vendors off that contract.
Okay. Could I ask one more question? Of course. Now that we're back into that again, there's something else that I meant to ask and I didn't ask, so I'll direct this at the city manager so as not to put Sal on the spot. There are several man lifts in this bid. Is this the one we want?
Yes.
Or is this the one that, is it the low bid per se?
Well, obviously, I'd be glad to have one that's twice the price and twice the gadgets, but,
Well,
given our budget, trying to match what we got from insurance, this replaces what we had, and that's sufficient.
And I will ask another question just as a follow-up to that. Is there something that would cost more but would be a heck of a lot more beneficial and useful to you that we might want to consider?
I don't know that we even considered that. We were trying to replace what we had with the reimbursement.
And
that we got.
understood, now you're without one and you sure would like to get one.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to see this turn into a prolonged process, but the flip side is, this is one of those deals where, $33,000 and we're basically on the hook for $142 at this point. Is there something we could spend, say, $5,000 on that you would say, gee, I would really like to have that? And we would
I can sure go back to staff and go back and look at the list and make sure we're not missing an opportunity like that. I'd be glad to do that.
So that's just a thought. I'll leave that to the rest of council as to what you all think that we should do at this point.
We have 3 here. Are they apples and apples or some better amenities and different functions than others? Yeah.
Based on,
They're all the same. They all have the same height. They provide the same. They have all the same type of
Same
same
function.
size, same everything like that. They're just just the price difference is all. Just in brand name, but they're 34 feet. I mean, do you always want something? I'm not. Do you want something more money?
It's always a foot too short.
Yeah, I mean, you can always go higher. You can always go bigger. You can always have one attached to a truck, vehicle. But to serve our needs and what we use, and the thing is that once you start getting into a higher height, then other licenses come into concern, wind rating, things like that. So this is a proper height what our staff is used to using. Currently, it's served the purpose as far as tree trimming during hurricane season, and palm fronds, things like that, palm trees, and low hanging trees. We relatively stay within that height, but of course, anything that exceeds that, we like to call out certified licensed professionals, like Duke Energy and stuff like that. We don't handle any of that stuff near the power poles and stuff like that. So.
Let me ask the question a different way. The one that got damaged, was that a self-propelled one or was that a tow behind like this?
It was a tow behind, just like.
Oh, was it? Okay. That's my only question.
If there's no further discussion, we're either looking for a motion or table this for further research. And I'll leave it to the council to decide whether they want to make a motion or not.
Well, I will ask anybody, is there anybody on council that would like to table this for further research before I make a motion?
No.
Okay, so I move that we purchase this item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second before we put it to a vote. This is a still pretty good purchase. Anyone from the general public like to comment? Seeing no hands, at this time we'll put it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We move on to the next item, which will be the investment performance as of March 31st, 2022. And this is going to be a presentation, if I'm not mistaken, not an action item, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's that, Mr. Duke, introduction.
And I'll turn it over to Rachel for her expertise.
This is just a discussion item. Per our investment policy, I have to provide a report to the city manager and the city council regarding our investments. So that's what I've done on the following page, and I've given you last year's information as well, so you can kind of compare and see that rates are actually going up.
No, but the mic's on. The mic is on.
It's hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry. I could hear myself, so I thought you could hear
Yeah, I
me.
can see your mic is on.
Yeah. You didn't hear any of that? Okay,
No,
I'll go on. So per our investment policy, I have to provide twice a year a report to the city manager and the council showing you our investment pools and how they're doing currently. So I provided you last year's figures and this year's as well, so you can compare them and see that currently the trend is going upwards. I know that they're looking to raise the rates again. They're estimating 5 more times this year, so.
Spend it all in one place.
As long as we ain't losing much.
The chart's helpful a lot, so thank you for putting that together and putting this in front of us. Based on what you said or the information, are there any questions or commentary from the council, Vice Mayor?
None.
Clerk?
Nope.
I would simply add that I believe that our city attorney was part of putting this investment package together, I think, when he went back.
You're probably thinking years ago, they passed it. Correct me if I'm wrong, they passed a statute, and about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we then elected to go with the more aggressive fund that we're allowed to, and nothing more, right? I mean, this is as far as we can go, I think.
It's not very aggressive, it's liquid.
That's what I meant.
Yeah,
though, but
it's basically a money market account.
yeah, in other words, it's state statute only allows us to invest in certain things, okay, and this is pretty much as aggressive as we're allowed to go at this point.
Well, there was what you did years ago,
Yeah.
which saved us back in the last recession. That was some pretty good stuff back then.
There was a meltdown in the market, I guess 2008. I was a city manager and I withdrew all the funds that afternoon, having read about it, and the market collapsed the next morning.
He ran to the bank and put everything in.
No one said thanks, that's the first time.
Thank you, Jim. But I think it was another time later on where you moved from that to some other equally secure investments that had a little bit better return. So,
but we're about as risky as we can get, regretfully.
well,
They changed the
I
statute.
would right now. Risky is not a good place to be.
You got that right.
And then, Ms. Rodriguez, did you have any questions? Okay. I believe if there's no further questions or commentary, I wanted to thank you for the presentation and the update, and we can move on to item 6 if that's okay with the council. Item 6 is an item I think that I asked to be placed on based on discussion that happened at the MPO meeting that I attended. So thank you for putting that on. I'm going to pass it over to this is a discussion item only as well. There's nothing to vote on here. But I wanted to pass this to Mr. Duke for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I did is start with, went back to the 2014 report, Vision 19. And I chose certain pages out of that report that I thought were germane to the underpass discussion. That report has a lot of other topics and activities proposed. But what I put into your packet this evening is specifically addressing the underpass and the WOD. And so as you go through that, you can basically get some idea of what the county was envisioning for an underpass. And at Mayor Council's request 2 weeks ago, I wanted to give you some idea of when the county's talking about an underpass project, this is what they're talking about. This was their report and their vision. And so if you haven't tried to answer questions, you all probably know as much or more about this project as I do. So this was how it was envisioned 8 years ago.
And I can tell you kind of what happened at the MPO meeting, if I'm may open, is what happened is where you see Boulevard in that red line, there was some property that needed to be acquired to go under the bridge there at 19 and then over to where the catches is on the water. And that property came up for sale. So the county commissioner said, look, we'd love to bump this to the front of the list now that one of the parcels of land that we'll need that we didn't really want to eminent domain to get to do this project is just on the market. So let's address it. So that's how it kind of came up. It was towards the bottom of the project list for the MPO. And they moved it, I think, up to number 3, which means it's going to move fairly quickly, at least in terms of decision making. One of the biggest concerns I have with this project is the way they have it mapped out. It would go under 19 and then cut down where Catch's parking lot is, in essence eliminating a big portion of their parking lot all the way down. And I had some concerns with that because I think as a city we have to support our business owners and respect their position on these types of projects. And I wasn't real comfortable plowing forward with this project unless they were comfortable with some kind of land swap or selling that piece of property as part of the agreement. And I don't know the owners of Catch's position, but I would think that may be something we want to fill out as a city, because I personally would want to support our business owner over there, whatever position they take on this. And I just simply don't know the answer to that question. So that's one of the issues that I think that's going to arise as this comes. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think the county or Newport Richey is really going to be too concerned about our business here and how our business owner feels about this project. But I think that it is within our city limits. They pay taxes here. I'm certainly concerned about what their position is. So that would be the other parcel of land that we would need to complete this the cart path that would link Port Richey to New Port Richey, and a lot of the county residents would probably use it as well. And then the other concern that came up, the other issue that came up was cost. And originally they had this right around, I think, about an $8 million project. Half of that would be paid by the Hike and Bike Trail Fund, which is a state fund. So that would be funded, which would leave $4 million to being funded by local sources. And the county position originally was, well, we should take that and cut it in thirds. So, each city of Newport Richey would have 3 million. We would have 1.3 million, and the county would have 1.3 million. And I took a pretty harsh position against that at the MPO meeting. In my opinion was that I felt that $4 million should be proportionate to the population of the county, city, and the cities involved, which would put us at a much lesser financial burden. We're maybe 1% of the county. So if you did it by proportion, the county would front the bulk of that money. And I told them that I would support that if they were coming forward and saying, look, we're going to do it proportionate to population. and/or size, however they want to put it together. But I think population would probably work the best. That would, I'd be much more supportive because I think that we could afford that without hurting our taxpayers here. Versus if we were to have to stroke a check for $1.3 million, I told them that would be a big percentage of our budget, and that would probably be not something we would be able to do or interested in doing. So that was a position I took personally, but I told them also that, and by the way, when I mentioned the proportionality, the county commissioners seemed to like that. I know that Commissioner Starkey, Moore, and I think even Oakley all said that they would think that would be the fair way to do it anyways. So the question is whether or not you guys had any different ideas, like that idea, either like, don't like the project, et cetera. So I just wanted to open it for discussion because I know that, we're going to be asked at some point, and I want to give our city management some direction when they come to us. So I wanted to open it for discussion. Those were the issues that I flushed out of the MPO, and I wanted to start, I guess, to my left with Ms. Rodriguez to see if you had any ideas, commentary, or opinions on it.
My one question is, when this was talked about at the county a couple years ago, it was not golf cart accessible, only for a walkway. Is that still the plan, or is it going to be golf cart accessible?
If we want to do it so it's golf cart accessible, that's when we would have to pay the $4 million. If we want to make it strictly a hike and bike trail, the government, the state government will come in and just 100% fund it. So the question is whether or not we want to pitch in to have golf carts go back and forth across 19. And that's the issue. If we want a hike and bike trail, we don't have to agree to pay anything. It's funded, and they'll put it through.
Okay. So this would be golf cart. Because I know that's a question. Okay. And they're allowing that, because I thought that the state would not allow that to happen.
I think that they would be able to go under and around.
Okay. That was my only question.
Mr. Colombo?
Well, I'm looking at page 116, just because it happens to be in front of me. And it seems to envision a boardwalk going down the river and up what on the dredging plans is known as channel 17, is it, or 19, and all the way up to James Clark and River Gulch Road. It sure seems like it's looking at a boardwalk in front of a whole bunch of privately owned property. I don't see how that would work at all. This is page 116 of our agenda, and 83 of ours, 116. It is under the picture. Page 83. Yeah, that's the one with all the brown line going all the way around.
Well, I think the river walk was different than the hike and bike trail.
Okay.
I think the hike and bike trail comes down Belia under 19 and wraps around, and then would go down in front of Catches and around and around through our waterfront area.
I mean, when you go to the issue of golf carts, I just don't. I mean, basically, if you're saying, are we willing to put $4 million into this project so golf carts can go under the bridge? I would venture so far as to say most of the golf carts that are going from one side to the other around here are just crossing the road to River Gulch and Grand, and they're not going to change. They're not going to take this big loop just because it happens to be there. I don't see that as a responsible use of funding. Now, if you're talking about, again, hike bike trail, the state and the county are pretty heavily invested in the idea of hike bike trails that go all over the county. So going to your point, actually a hike and bike trail that goes under the bridge to our waterfront district is arguably of more value to them than us having an avenue to go from the waterfront district the other way as residents of the city of Port Richey. So if you keep it hike and bike oriented, yeah, I see no reason why the state/county shouldn't fund either through grants or their own fundings the absolute huge lion's share of this project.
If it's just hike and bike, it's 100% funded already.
Yeah.
It doesn't involve us.
Right.
So, but you know, right now the issue is whether or not legally you can get golf carts across. The county commissioners are afraid that someone's going to get wiped out on 19 on a golf cart. So they said that this would be the safest way if you want to link the two cities by golf cart and then have county residents come in. The point that you raised, I also raised it at the meeting, that I felt that the bulk of the golf carts would be coming from Newport Richey in the county to our city, not the other way around.
We're the destination.
We're the destination. So, you know, for that reason, I said that, you know, if they wanted to open up a checkbook and pay for it, it would probably be real easy to work with them if they wanted us to fund a portion of this that's too much. Then I personally, I wouldn't have been interested. I wouldn't be interested. So.
Well, again, I think if they're willing to fund a very large portion of it to turn it into a golf cart capable underpass, I don't think any of us would have a big problem with that. If you're asking me, am I willing to commit $4 million to this project out of our budget, I can't see any way we can make that work. That's just a non-starter. I mean, what's our annual budget, Mr. Toots? I mean, that's 6. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's like 2/3 of an annual budget for us just for that one little project.
Well,
it just doesn't make sense.
And I haven't heard from them, but I would presume that, you know, if it's less than 50 grand or less, for example, that may be something we would discuss and talk about. But when you start getting into greater numbers, which would be if we were paying beyond our proportion, then that's where I have a problem with it. So,
I agree.
Okay. Mr. McClary, I wanted your opinion on this.
I mean, for a $4 million cut, and we're 1% of it, we're 1% of, as you said, the county's budget. So for 40 grand, even 60 grand, to me, the expenditure is a no-brainer. It freshens up the city, freshens up that whole area that needs to be refreshed. So, you know, I have no problem with that at all. Like Mr. Colombo said, for $1 million out of our budget, no way is it worth it. No way is there value. $1 million worth of value to the city of Port Richey from that underpass. Now, to the county, yes, and to maybe even Newport Richey, arguably, yes, but that's their problem. That's not our problem. So for the population allotment, I guess is the way they were phrasing it, then yeah, I'm all for it. In terms of catches, yes, they do have a property impact. Even from the grading, I'm not sure how that specific path could work. Having been over there, they're probably going to have to alter this somewhat to make even the grades work coming out of there. Yes, catches would conceivably lose land and parking, but they'd also be at the prime location right out from the bridge of anyone coming across. I don't think you could have asked for a better spot to be coming under that underpass and being the first restaurant as people come through. So, you know, there's some give and take there. You know, I don't think we should feel too bad for them overall, but you know, I don't just seeing what that area is. And I think even a couple years ago when we had the meeting here, everyone was kind of like, well, I don't think, and I think even they may have admitted it at that point, that grade may not work. And they may have to actually do something around catches and go up Bridge Street or something of that nature is what they were actually working off of.
Well, we have an easement on Bridge Street. That's
Correct.
why I was, you know.
Yeah, so then they were thinking, well, maybe we actually extend this ramp around their dock, in which case you may be closing off of their marina access, we'll call it, for lack of a better term, but they're already building another marina. So I think, you know, we're on step 2. This is step 50 as to how that runs. And we shouldn't jump up and down too much right now to protect catches at this point when they're getting some obvious advantages to this. And I don't think this is fully vetted yet.
And again, if you look at the section of the river where you're coming out to Catches and you're looking at the waterfront property that Catches has, which is dockage, so they have people coming by boat. Arguably, you would like to say, okay, let's have a walkway, but still Catches would still have their docks. The problem is that is a very narrow part of the river. There's just not a heck of a lot to play with before you actually get into the navigable channel. As you come around to the marina, it widens out, and obviously they've got a lot of submerged land leases out there that they're using that have been around forever. They just renewed them, I think, last year. But they're old submerged land leases that were marina focused years ago. So, but at that particular spot where you've got the bridge and you got Catches, that's why they put the Highway 19 bridge there. That's the narrowest part of the river. So it just stands to reason. I would a boardwalk along Catches be really nice, you know, for folks to walk and see the river? Yeah, that'd be swell. I just don't see that working out. But again, I don't know if anybody, I would assume somebody's had a chat with Catches. The subject's been kicked around for years.
And that may be, you know, maybe that's why they were looking at the marina, thinking they may, because the county could come through and eminent domain that and say, no, your dockage area is now our boardwalk area, and they wouldn't have a chance. But again, they still have the advantage of we're first in line coming under the.
I think it's a great concept. Obviously, there's a lot of planning, more work needs to be involved, but I do like to see the city be a partner in this to move forward. I mean, we could go, right here alone, everybody had a different idea of what to do, but to have the city move forward, to be a partner in this, I think it's a great idea to move forward.
So I guess the big question is by consensus. You know, I think at some point they're probably going to reach out to Mr. Dew. They're not going to necessarily come to us. And I'm sure they'll bring it back, but there'll probably be some discussions because I know it's coming down the pike. Is the general consensus that we're for this project, we're just concerned about our share of the funding, and if that becomes a proportionate issue or less of an issue for us, then that would make us more interested. Is that kind of the general consensus?
Yeah, I would just add one other thing. I believe several years back, there was an interlocal agreement between us, Newport Richey, and the county to fund, I think, $100,000 engineering study or something like that. And that was split three ways. Now, that was decided on just for that study. Whether it happened or not, I honestly don't recall. I don't remember seeing the fruits of it, but
I went to the meeting with Mr. Lupo way back,
okay,
so we did. That's where they have the drawings. They had, and they did have.
So that's what this is.
Yes.
So we paid for that piece of paper twice.
I think you paid 35,000 is my guess.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah, I think it was 100,000.
It was 100 grand. It was split three ways.
So anyway, just my only point being made that, okay, since we did that, they've got it in their brains that we're gonna pay a third of everything, and no, we're not.
Well, I've opposed it, that third idea from the very get-go when I went, and they had the plans laid out, and they had two drawings. They had one that came down fully on the bridge and around, taking the parking lot just directly down 19, and then they had another one that wound in front of Catches and then down Bridge Street. So they had both in the feasibility study. And the preference of the county was just to go just straight down 19 right next to it. And then have a barrier between 19 and the path just to separate. That was their kind of consensus. But at those meetings, which was probably now over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, my point is that we may have paid our fair share, our third, for the feasibility study. But when we looked at the cost estimates, I said that's not something that the city would be able to afford. And the county said, well, let's not worry about that right now. And that's not something that I can ever not worry about. That's something that we
Do
have
you
to
recall
address.
when they suggested down coming down 19, going in other words, basically were they essentially saying they were planning on using state right of way?
Yeah,
Like highway
they didn't
19.
figure out how to get past that part yet.
Oh, okay. 'Cause it's either private property or it's state right of way. It belongs to somebody. Somebody's got to give that land up. It doesn't belong to us.
Well, I can tell you, the state's not gonna give it up.
I don't know.
But they had plans for the properties there, and I know the sticking point where the properties on either side, one's up for sale now and the others would have been catches, so, right now at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you go down to that end of Highway 19 on the east side of 19. For those property owners and those businesses that were built years before Highway 19 was as wide as it is now, they don't have any real estate to give up and still have a functioning business piece of property. They just can't do it. Some of them are way, if you were to try to rebuild a building on that piece of property right now, you could not build it as close to 19 as they are right now. Those are just old grandfathered in buildings. So, yeah, I don't see that as being feasible at all. So, obviously, that's really not the issue here, because that's probably never would happen even if we wanted it to.
So I think does that kind of close the discussion? Are you guys comfortable with that?
Yeah, very comfortable.
Okay. And that's just a discussion item, so there's no action that's necessary there that I'm aware of, which closes out council business and it brings us old business. And I was going to pass that to Mr. Duke just to kind of go through the highlights and then open it up to council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of updates, and these are on your agenda. The Seaside property, the property owners are still working on obtaining their liquor license and business tax receipt, so that's moving forward. I have seen on Facebook they're advertising for employees, so looks like that's still moving towards having a viable business there. Talked about the Limestone Drive Pier already, and we are still working on Clark Moody Boulevard question and getting an answer. We're in the process of having a title company look at deeds on that street. So we don't have an answer yet, but we're still moving forward on getting an answer.
On the issue of the Seaside property, is that set to open from your knowledge, or is that are there still some things that they have to do before they can open that property up for business? Let me ask Veronica.
Yes, they are in the process of getting our licenses. That's what we're waiting for now before a business tax and an inspection is done.
Okay, and does that include the entire property or just the
Just the restaurant. So the motel is completely locked down.
Okay.
That's been gutted out and it's been boarded up, cleaned up, empty. From my understanding, after speaking with the owners of the property, is they have it on the market for sale, for investment purposes, for hotel and whatnot, but nothing as of yet.
Okay, and I know that the Seaside property it's a multi-story, it's a 2-story. And if I remember, there was a balcony and stuff up top. Is that part of the inspection, the whole?
Yes, the whole building, the whole structure will be inspected.
So so in other words, they can't just say we're gonna open the bottom and then leave the top.
They can if they choose to, they just won't get the CO for the top floor.
Okay, so they could, if they wanted to, just open the
If
bottom.
it's not structurally sound, because the building has been in use for quite some time, if they choose to close it off and they don't want that at that time, then they can certainly not use it.
Can I ask a question on the Seaside property, because I'm not really up to speed on what the plans are and what's going on right there. So the property has changed hands, obviously. They are planning on opening a restaurant there.
That's correct.
How long has it been closed?
It did not exceed 180 days or the 6-month time frame. It's been open, getting refurbished. So they have it open, we're just waiting for licenses now to come through.
Okay, is there anything as far as they're bringing parking into compliance up to code? Because that's not up to code parking to have there. It's
Well,
just,
because
it's a
the
dirt,
restaurant
it's a dirt
was-
lot.
Right. Well, the restaurant is gonna be open the way it was before. So building official is okay with that opening as it was. Now, if he had to revise it, if the restaurant was closed for over a period of time and they had to revamp it, or then they would have to bring the parking up to code.
Well, actually, according to the waterfront overlay district, all parking down there was supposed to be brought up to code within 2 years.
Within 2 years, that's correct.
Within 2 years of implementation
Correct.
of the waterfront overlay.
That's
district.
correct. And it never was implemented.
Hasn't that been closed for like 2 years, Seaside?
No, Seaside just closed, last year.
Sure seems longer than that to me, but okay.
Yeah. It just changed ownership in June or July of last year. Because we had it on the slum and blight order. And they had it until July before we were gonna take it down.
So June of last year, so that's a year.
The motel part, we were gonna take it down.
Oh, you're talking about the restaurant part.
The restaurant was not, the restaurant was okay.
Okay, in what way?
It was okay to function, it was okay, it was running as a business back then, and then it changed hands. Then they closed it and have been doing interior remodeling inside.
But the only parking they have down there that's actually paved, which is, I think, part of the code down there, is city-owned. That little loop right there is a city use.
Whiskey Joe's had to pave, they paved in front of, their business.
Sure.
And their other lot is supposedly a turf lot. I mean, it was basically, they threw down some plastic netting, everybody said that was okay,
But it's not a dirt lot. Well,
yeah.
it is, I guess,
With
but,
the potholes.
so. But my point is, there's nowhere to park other than, there's a loop that goes down through there that's.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm just questioning the nature of the parking material, as it were, that's all. And generally, the waterfront overlay district has code. And, they've been closed, and I was wondering, well, did they need to bring it up to code? Now, whether the relevant code is dirt block or whether the relevant code is paved is up for discussion at that point. And basically, essentially, as I recall, in the waterfront overlay district code, it says that the businesses will comply to the underlying requirements for parking, which is C3? C2. Until such time as the city builds a parking garage, which of course never happened and never will happen. But, basically, the way the code reads right now, there's not much different in the requirements for parking down there than anyplace else.
So what do you park for that area?
But I think the one thing that is clear is you're not supposed to just park in a dirt lot either, so I mean,
That's
that's.
correct, it should be
right.
geo-wet, it should be non-rock, it should be.
Purpose,
Correct.
so you don't need retention. That was kind of
Correct.
behind that.
So do they have any spaces at all at Seaside?
Not to my
No, it's a dirt lot.
knowledge.
It's just dirt.
Now, we said the same thing about the parking lot across the street on the Coloquitas property, and we dug down, and there is geo-web. It's just down there because it's so old. So that parking lot, so Coloquitas used to own Seaside. So unless we dig up that lot to see if there's geo-web in there, it's been like that for many, many years.
I understand that, but this parking is still an issue. This is why I'm lost. I'm sitting here, you gotta have a restaurant with no parking. How do you do that? How do we allow that?
Is Seaside in compliance with the parking requirements of the overlay district?
Seaside currently, no, it's not.
Wasn't there a thing within 2 years of passage that they had to be in compliance?
Yes.
For our code, that's correct.
So how are we giving them a CO?
Well, they're not getting a CO because the building is already existent.
Or certificate of completion,
All they would
certificate
get
of
is a
compliance?
business tax receipt to be able to operate their business.
Didn't they do
Would have nothing to
physical
do
work?
with the structure of it.
Did they pull a permit on anything?
No, no permit was required. Per the building official, no permit was required.
So they didn't do any work on the
They
interior?
did interior remodel, but it was nothing that required a permit. They did some flooring and some cabinetry and things of that nature. There's no kitchen there, so there was no Ansel
How is there a
system, nothing of that. There was no structural.
So there's no
changes.
kitchen in Seaside?
So how do you have a
There's
restaurant
no-
with no kitchen?
There's no kitchen inside there.
So where
There's
do
a
they
On
kitchen
the
in-
second floor, there is. But the business that ran it before was a bar.
But they're gonna be serving food.
Not to my knowledge, we don't have any of that information yet.
So it's not a restaurant then?
So
We don't have the paperwork yet. We're still waiting to see from the state what it is that they're even doing. To my knowledge, it's just somebody it's a tenant who's occupying that space as a restaurant. At that point, when he brings us all of that paperwork, then we have to do the inspections of such. But we have no plans, there was no structural changes, nothing that required a permit.
My recollection of the old owners, when they left, they took every piece of equipment with them, including air conditioners. I mean, they basically
I don't-
stripped everything out of there. Anything of value they took, even if it was scrap value.
Yeah, I don't know.
So if they're opening a public venue right now, is there an inspection that they have to go through?
We will do a fire inspection and we will do a building inspection.
And that building inspection will also include zoning compliance,
Correct.
which would also include parking compliance within the
Correct.
zoning.
Would be everything.
So do they know that
you
they have
just
no
haven't
parking?
They are aware of
You
that.
just haven't talked to them about the parking yet.
Oh, they are aware of it.
Okay.
They are aware of it.
So do we have to, who gives them a license to open a business?
We do.
Basically, they haven't come to them yet and said, we want to open a restaurant, we want to open a business, in which case they can't say, well, you need parking because you're not in parking compliance, or you're out of parking compliance. We're early in this, they haven't said we're.
We're not early, they're looking to hire people.
Well, the problem is they can't do it without a license.
Yeah, they won't get any type of license to open until they make sure all the regulations are there. That they meet all of.
So we will chat about this again.
Yes. We're about a month early to the discussion of
We will revisit the subject. when
of
there
the
is-
owner of Seaside saying, why can't I open my business because this parking has been like this for 2 years and now you're picking on me.
We've all talked about it, but our vice mayor hasn't commented, so I just wanted to open the floor if you had any comments or anything on this issue.
We'll just wait to see what happens when they approach the building department.
If I do something, I'm sorry, I'm just stuck here. If I do something at my house and the city rides by and see me doing something, I need to have a permit for it, don't they come to me? Like, we don't do the same thing with businesses, we know that they're doing stuff, we don't go to them and say, hey, you need parking?
The building official has been there. There was nothing that required a permit. So I have to go by what he says to me.
Okay.
So, yeah, there are acceptable uses given the zoning of a piece of property. There's the acceptable use of C2 property is restaurant. So they don't have to come to us and ask permission to open up a restaurant. Though they, like any other business, they have to comply with city codes, whatever those codes may be. Height restrictions, the type of business, do they need a special exception, blah, 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 blah. So that's.
And they have to put in the application for the new business before they open it.
Well, it's really not a license, it's just a tax. I mean,
It's a business tax.
it's a business tax, it's not a license.
Yeah, they're not getting a CO of any sort or anything like that.
And I do have more questions. The building official, is this the current one or previous one
This
that we're
is the
going
current one and the previous one.
Maybe even the one before.
No, just the last two.
But if you're opening a public entity or reopening a public entity, that still has to go through the inspection again. You have to go through Cip fire inspection, you have to go through building
It's gonna
inspection.
have to go through both.
Yeah, but the restaurant, you have to go through a board of health inspection.
Yeah, so that's where it gets reassessed for zoning compliance as well. So we're gonna be here talking about
Yeah,
this.
that's what I said. We discussed it later. We got nothing to talk about, right?
Because there's gonna be egress review and everything else. Well, you can go through site plan.
They will probably have to change the directions of the streets again.
All right, we closed out, that was on the I brought up the seaside property issue. I think we talked about the pier. The other issue I just wanted to touch on is the Clark Moody Boulevard. We talked about ARPA funds at prior meetings and utilizing some of those ARPA funds for some much needed road work.
So it happens, you have two doors open at once.
Probably the main road would be Bay Boulevard, which is going to be the most costly, I would imagine. The question is we're stuck on whether or not we have to pay for Clark Moody, but the issue is that I wanted to address, or at least bring up, is given the amount of that road, even if we didn't have to pay for it, we could still just pay for it, link it in with the rest of our road projects and do it, couldn't we?
Yes. I would be reluctant for us to set the precedent of paving property that's not ours.
I agree 100%.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you because, I think we're spending more time and trouble in some ways trying to figure out who's going to pave the road when we could just pave it and kind of move on. But
Well, it was kind of our decision, as it were, in the first place to pick Clark Moody. So, I mean, it's not like that was forced upon us. That was just.
No, they came to us.
no, they came down
They
and
came
asked
to
us
us
to
at city
look at
council.
it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. You missed that one.
I should have came and requested.
You missed that one.
The parts.
They stood there.
Hey, we put a new roof on for me, would you please? Got a grant?
And I think at the time we discussed it, we may have done it. We just didn't have any money in the line item budget to do it. And then this issue came up kind of after the fact. And
Agreed 100%. I mean, if it's our road, we should pave it. Yeah, it's in terrible condition. If it's not our road, we don't pave it. That's my opinion.
Okay. So we'll wait for the legal review and then come back. If any of you felt that way, I think it should come back and we'll discuss it as a collective group at that point.
Yes.
At the point that I have a 100% confident answer from Mr. Matthew, I'll bring that back to you and we'll proceed. Right now, we're not there yet. And we've got some more questions to answer, so we're working on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the only other point on that is we're still over there patching it all the time, aren't we?
Correct.
That man too.
So, I was just trying to.
They come in thinking they're gonna get paved and we come back and say, we're not even fixing it anymore.
Okay, so so once we have that legal review, we can not only talk about whether or not we're going to pave it, but whether or not we're going to maintain it.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
My understanding from staff is this is a question that has gone on for decades. Is Clark Moody ours? Is it not? We patch it, we don't patch it. It's trying to be responsive without having an answer. We go put cold patch in the holes and then Richie's phone, Sal's phone, and my phone doesn't ring quite as often. But after the next rain and another 50 trucks, the hole is deep again, our phones ring. So, but at the point that we have an absolute answer, if it's our street, we'll pave it. If it isn't, we won't pave it.
Okay. Well, it'll be a discussion at that point, at least.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I had on old business. Any further old business? Looking for a motion.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. If we can, I'd like to take a 5-minute